Hello and good day to you. Welcome to this summary of the first 6 lessons of the Sunday school of the first half of the year. Our theme has been God in the Administration of Man 2. This summary is intent on only giving us brief reminders of what these lessons were about. If you need details, you can always watch the videos on each lesson again. The lessons are divided into 3 units of 4 lessons each. Unit 1 is Gentiles administration before the exile. And of course, the exile was when the Israelites were taken captive away from their land. Unit 2 was Gentiles administration in the exilic and post-exilic periods. Unit 3 is in Jesus and the church. So today we'll look at Unit 1 and 2 lessons from Unit 2. From Unit 1, we have lessons 1 through 4. So lesson 1 says, all souls belong to God. In this lesson, we learned that God did not tolerate disobedience from anyone he created and intervened by correcting, punishing, or sometimes even destroying to ensure his eternal purpose was fulfilled. God created the world and humans, but soon men began to sin against God. God sent man out of the Garden of Eden, but sin continued until God was sorry that he had created man. God sent a flood to destroy humanity, but spared Noah and his family to continue the human race. Man soon forgot God again and began working on their own plans, which was against the will of God. They wanted to stay together in one city and make a name for themselves. But God confounded their language and scattered them abroad the face of the earth. In the second part of the lesson, we see how God unfolded his eternal agenda by calling out Abram and making a covenant with him. We learned that Abraham responded positively to God, showing his attitude of being accessible, teachable, and humble. God promised to bless him and make him great. In lesson 2, we see how God defended the rights of both Jews and Gentiles as all souls belong to him. Abraham had told a half-truth about Sarah being his sister but not his wife to King Pharaoh. Pharaoh, having been misled by the untold truth, took Sarah in, but he fell sick. This was a way of God showing him that he was doing something wrong. God intervened and did not let Pharaoh touch Sarah until the truth was revealed. A similar occurrence happened with Isaac, Abraham's son. God defended his own people against the ungodly. In the second part of the lesson, we saw God defending Hagar and her son Ishmael when they were sent out by Abraham and his wife Sarah. Although God had supported that they be sent out, he refused to forsake them. Ishmael became a great nation, and God also defended the Gibeonites against Israel and punished Israel for not keeping their agreement with the Gibeonites, even though it was the Gibeonites who had been fraudulent in making the agreement in the first place. God cares about all souls, whether Jew or Gentile, believer or non-believer. From lesson 3, we began to see how God influenced the administration in the Gentile nations as we started with Egypt. In Egypt, he used Joseph and Moses at different times to influence the leadership to ensure that his purpose was fulfilled. Joseph was sold into Egypt as a slave, but God took him to the throne as the overall administrator of Egypt, only next to Pharaoh during a global famine. Moses was born in Egypt to Hebrew parents. He escaped death as a baby, but God arranged his upbringing within the palace of Pharaoh and helped Moses to discover his true purpose, which was to deliver the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. God worked out his plan and brought out Israel as a nation from slavery. God is strategic and purposeful in what he does. In lesson 4, we see God showing his supremacy among the Gentiles. We saw him do it in lesson 3 with the Egyptians. In the first division of lesson 4, he allows the Philistines overcome his people because they had sinned against him. They had forsaken him and they thought that by having the Ark of Covenant with them, they could have his presence. They were wrong. The Philistines captured the Ark and the Israelites were defeated. God would, however, not be defeated. The Philistines learned this as the statue of their god Dagon fell flat before God's Ark of Covenant and eventually broke into pieces before the ark. No one can defeat nor outrun God. He remains supreme. In Division 2, we see how he strategically appointed Elijah to take over from Elijah and Jehu to become the king in Israel and Hazael to become king in Syria to fulfill his purposes. Elijah was given this mandate, but could only appoint Elisha during his lifetime. Elisha was used to complete these appointments. So God provided Elisha with the ability and the opportunity to complete the task that he had instructed Elijah about. The lesson here is that God's purposes outlive the individual. They are a continuum. So we should work with him to bring up others who will carry on his purpose. In chapter 5, we saw God moving other nations against his people. Israel and Judah sinned against God. Their kings followed in the sinful lines of their predecessors. Israel beginning with Jeroboam and Judah beginning with Manasseh. In the end, God allowed Assyria to capture Samaria. The people were captured and scattered abroad the Gentile nations. Judah was also plundered as Nebuchadnezzar led the Babylonians to invade Jerusalem and the people taken captive. Jerusalem became desolate. God used the Gentile nations to punish his people. When we fall in love with the world, we can't be carried away with it. In chapter 6, in Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar was very full of himself, and God had to let him know in several instances who was really in charge. He used dreams. He used Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to teach Nebuchadnezzar these lessons. Nebuchadnezzar finally had his sanity taken and was taught humility by God. He acknowledged God as sovereign. In the second division of the lesson, Belteshazzar did not learn from the experiences of his father Nebuchadnezzar. He also showed a lot of pride and thought that he could play down on the God of the universe. He experienced the shock of his life. His kingdom was taken away from him and given to others while he lost his life. We also learned about how God used Daniel and his lion's den experience to show the Babylonians his supremacy. This is how far we can go today. Let's meet next week to conclude. God bless you.